NFL insider Jay Glazer, who, if you followed the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you're close in the news or around the news of Mike Tomlin, you understand that of all the NFL insiders, Jay Glazer has a very strong relationship with Mike Tomlin, has always had a very good hand and a very good idea about the news when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. He said that while he thinks that Mike Tomlin could be traded tomorrow and that he's not totally sure that the Steelers are looking to get rid of Mike Tomlin at this point, he did say if you're a team looking for a head coach, you should make a phone call. He dropped the Washington Commanders as a name to watch for that potential trade. And again, if anybody else says this, it's nothing. It's no big deal. Who cares? But Jay Glazer comes out and starts dropping names about potential trades and the possibility of Mike Tomlin actually heading somewhere else. You kind of feel like you have to listen. You hear this, you hear the Washington Commanders. There's every bit of this that we'll dive into, including what it's going to cost and what the compensation is and if it makes sense and how the Pittsburgh Steelers replace them. But the big question, obviously, to start here, I mean, do you take this with as much credibility, I guess, as most are taking it because it's Jay Glazer making their proposed trade?
Yeah, I mean, sure, I do. But also, I mean, I don't think Glazer said anything super groundbreaking necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't reporting that, the Washington Commanders are interested in Mike Tomlin. He was just saying this would probably be a good idea for a team that's, probably going to move on from their head coach at the end of this year. It's going to, has some talent that they might want to capitalize on right now. Like, trading for Mike Tomlin is not the worst idea in the world for this team. So you give it credibility in the fact that it's maybe a decent idea, and maybe Glazer's just kind of doing Mike Tomlin some favors, planting the seed in some people's minds. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I mean, I do kind of believe him and think that this is a good idea, or at least an idea worth thinking about as well. Because I mean, it would kind of there's two different ways for both of these organizations to go. If you're Washington and Pittsburgh, when you're approaching this trade, but it seems at least there's an argument to be made for this trade in the first place for both of these sides. Both of them can kind of benefit, and it's not the silliest idea in the world.
No, it definitely is not. It's crazy because Washington, every time the Mike Tomlin trade situation comes about, Washington is the name to watch every single time. I remember a couple of years ago, it was the first time I ever heard about trading a coach. As a fan from afar, you don't really think that's a real thing. We never grew up in an era where you traded a coach. I was sitting in the press box, or I was sitting in the conference room back in the day when it was still in the facility. It's like my first year there or something, and it's near the trade deadline, and all these rumors, these speculations start coming out of Mike Tomlin being traded from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and which is hilarious because we just continue to run the same cycles all the time with the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, and this is a prime example of that. But all those speculations start coming out. Somebody from, I don't know, the Washington Post or somewhere shows up in Pittsburgh. He's sitting right in front of me. I remember I had no idea who this guy was. Everybody did. I was still new to the journalism game, so, my apologies. Probably a big name. Probably should have known who it was. I'm sitting there behind him. Everybody's asking random questions, just like, boom, injury updates, quarterback situation, blah, 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 blah. This guy at the end of the press conference, starts talking, and he says something like, I don't remember the exact words, but it was something like, what are your thoughts on the speculations of being traded to the Washington Commanders? And my eyes, I wish there was a camera, because I was just like, what are you talking about, pal? And Tomlin blew it right off. Obviously, I don't think he gave him two words, and we moved on. But I think it's hilarious that it's always Washington, or at least has been Washington, which starts to make you believe maybe it does make more sense, and maybe there are more people talking about this than should be. When it comes to the actual Glazer thing, yeah, I agree. It was more just, if you want to start thinking about it, this is where you should start thinking about it. What's it cost? You send Mike Tomlin anywhere. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, what are you looking for? If you're another team and you're sitting around thinking, I need Mike Tomlin, what are you giving up for a guy who hasn't won many playoff games in the last 10 years, hasn't won a Super Bowl in quite some time, but has produced, 17 winning seasons? What are you giving up, and what are you asking for Mike Tomlin?
Well, I think this is an interesting exercise because it's measuring like results, I think, versus reputation. And I think Mike Tomlin has a better reputation outside of Pittsburgh right now than he has in it, and probably has for a while.
Yeah.
You look at some of the coaches you've gotten traded before. Like Sean Payton, John Gruden. Like I think Mike Tomlin, at least his reputation and what other teams think of him as, is closer to like those guys. Closer to, people think pretty highly of him outside of Pittsburgh still, and I think that could carry things a long way. As much as people in Pittsburgh love to gripe about the results, I think people outside of Pittsburgh look at it more as, oh, Mike Tomlin did such a great job, winning seasons and all that with imperfect rosters. So I still think if you're the Steelers, you start and end the conversation at a first round pick plus, a later round pick in the future. That kind of seems to be. There aren't many coaching trades to draw on, and I know every situation is different. But you look at the past, you look at history. That's kind of the going rate for a coach of Tomlin's caliber with that kind of resume. It's a first round pick in the following year, and then the year after it's a later round pick. So if you're the Steelers, I don't think you can afford to, or you shouldn't, at least even consider going any lower than that, because you may, like I said, we may not think very highly of him right now, but I can assure you the rest of the league definitely does.
Guys, we have gear, new merchandise from AST to Mooth, Bleed Black and Gold, Kenny to George, and plenty of others now at our new website, blackandgoldapparel.com. And the coolest part, 50% of all profits at our store go to UPMC Children's Hospital here in Pittsburgh to make sure that we are giving back. We can't thank you guys enough, and we want to show you guys how thankful and how grateful we are for everything by making sure that we do our part to make the community here in Pittsburgh better. Go check out everything. We tried to make everything new and improved, from our designs to our quality of sweatshirts and t-shirts and everything else. Let us know and check everything out at blackandgoldapparel.com. And as always, thank you guys for everything. Yeah, 100%. You leave the city of Pittsburgh. We both have dads that are into sports, and every time I talk to my dad, every single time my dad calls me and we're just talking football, he's always constantly reminding me that Tomlin is just a phenomenal head coach. And he's like, oh yeah, he's like, I can't believe Steelers fans are this angry. I'm like, I get it, but I also get that, the Denver Broncos haven't been good in a long time, so you're seeing it from a different perspective. The Washington Commanders haven't been good in a long time, so they're seeing it from a different perspective. Mike Tomlin to these guys is, a godsend. This guy would change the organization. He doesn't even have to take them to a Super Bowl. He's just got to change the organization. But at the same time, I think that if Tomlin ends up somewhere else, like, think of the culture shift that happens in another place and how, like, a fresh culture shift can actually improve that team. Like, you go to a team with a bunch of talent who doesn't have a strong culture, Tomlin walks in there and changes the culture, and everybody gets on him because they see the results. I think that's the biggest difference. Is in Pittsburgh, they have a higher bar and they're not meeting that bar, so people are starting to look at it, as the players, everybody are starting to look at it and saying, why can't we hit this bar? What is wrong with this bar? They're getting upset that's causing issues. Somewhere else, the bar is, if this is the Steelers' bar, this is other team's bar. Tomlin could get here in 2 minutes. It'd take him a week before that team is at that bar. And then you got everybody in that building believing in this guy and thinking that he's going to turn this around. That culture explodes. That's how you go win a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? That's when people talk about a fresh face and everything, that's the culture change that you would want if you're another team. I agree. I think it starts with a first round pick. I think it's more, like the Sean Payton thing I got, but like he also was out of the league for a couple of years. And to be quite honest, he didn't have the success that Mike Tomlin's had in the NFL. Like, he's had a lot of success, ton of success, but Tomlin's got 2 Super Bowl. I guess Payton's got 2 Super Bowl appearances too, right? Or just the one?
I think no, he has two. I'm pretty sure because didn't he lose one to
Yeah, he lost one
Pitt?
to Peyton Manning. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. So they both have 2. So I guess they are on the same pedestal there. First round pick. I mean, that's easy where they start. What did Denver get? Just a first round pick and then a future.
Yeah, they got like a future. Like I don't know if it was like a second.
It was, but it was like right there. It was like second to fourth. Like it wasn't super low. I think
it
you're
was
right.
Oh no, it was a second round. It was a 2024 second round.
There you go.
Wow.
I think that's the bar that you set. I think it's at least a first and a second round pick. I think from there you see what you could get. Now the question is, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, are you taking that? Like if Washington calls you at the end of the season, you don't make the playoffs. Let's act as if the Steelers lose the next 4 games. You don't make the playoffs. Washington calls you. Hey, here's a first and a second round pick. We just want Mike Tomlin. You taking that trade? And I mean, clear as day, actually. Are you taking that trade?
I'm really tempted to say yes because it feels like, I don't know, it feels like they're going to move on from Mike Tomlin. I mean, I don't know. I have nothing to base that on. It's just kind of vibes and what I feel. But I feel like they're going to move on from Mike Tomlin at the end of the year anyway. So it's kind of a trade him while he has value type of thing instead of a let him walk for nothing. So, I mean, I think it kind of comes down to whether or not if you're Art Rooney, you are considering bringing him back next year. Like that's, I mean, if you're going to get rid of him, you might as well trade him. I mean, as far as this seems like a fair deal if you're going to do it. I'll put it that way. So like if you did put him on the trade block and this was the offer for him, I'd absolutely take that. I mean, shoot, that's going to be I think right now that's a top 4 pick. It's like the number. I think that's where the Commanders sit right now. Like, are you kidding me? Do you know what the Steelers could do with that? Like they could
get a quarterback.
Right. Yeah, they could. But like they could do so many things with that in their next pick and then getting another pick on top of that maybe in the future. Like I don't know if you can really pass up that kind of opportunity.
No, I think I agree. Like what you could do with that is because you keep your first round pick, and if the Steelers continue to lose, like they're a top 15 pick at this point. They're sitting like the 10 to 15 range. Could you imagine having the 4th pick in the draft and maybe like the 13th pick in the draft, and then knowing that you have to go next year and you get 2 second round picks, and it doesn't even matter if Tomlin turns it around, like that's still a second round pick. Is it worth in your eyes, is Tomlin and his philosophy and everything that's going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers irreversible enough to where it's worth having to find a new coach? Because I think people have like this worry, and I think that's the argument people are starting to make. I've seen it all over social media. I've heard it on the radio. I've seen it on ESPN and everywhere else, that there is this argument of, well, what if your next head coach sucks? I'm somebody who's like, I don't think anybody in the NFL is sitting around going, man, we shouldn't make a move because what if that guy sucks? Like, I don't think that NFL teams think that way. I think they think optimistically and like, this guy could be the next guy. Do you think that that's do you think that thought's there? Like, do you think that the thought of a first round pick, even if it is a top 5 pick, being worth the risk of your next offense or your next head coach not being the guy, even though Mike Tomlin has not led you to much postseason success in the last, 0 postseason success in the last like 6-7 years?
Yeah, I've heard this argument too, and I don't know, this is like really simplistic, but my counter argument would be just kind of don't hire a bad coach. Like I don't know, like
That's what I'm saying.
I don't think that reality is like baked into the notion of firing Tomlin. Like you don't have to hire a bad coach if you fire Mike Tomlin, you know? And
yep.
And so I would say, to answer your question, like, yeah, I think that is worth the risk. I would just, if I'm the Steelers and I'm going to do this, I'm not going to live in my fears, quite on to borrow Tomlinism. I'm not going to live in the fear of not being able to hire a good coach. I'm going to make the best hire I can and kind of have faith in that. I don't think you do this. I don't think you avoid making a move because you don't trust yourself to hire someone good. that feels completely wrong to me.
Yeah, the using a Tomlinism to describe how the Steelers should probably move on from Mike Tomlin if the opportunity presented itself is that was a move right there. That was smooth. I agree. I don't live in that fear. I don't think any NFL team lives in that fear. I don't think anybody in the NFL is sitting around going, man, we've gone through a dozen interviews. We cut our candidates down to 2 guys, but we're pretty positive they're both going to suck. We're very nervous that neither of these guys are going to be good. I don't think anybody sits around and does it. I mean, in like worst case scenario, man, just go get a veteran who's got like 2-3 years left in his. Go hire Bill Belichick. You know, tell Bill to come over to Pittsburgh, come hang out, and just go hire everybody else around him and just see if it works. Who cares? But I agree. I don't know. I don't want to say situation to monitor, but definitely something to start wrapping your brain around and considering as a possibility for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because I'm sure that teams will actually call in the offseason, especially if things start going wrong. And Steelers would never like make it known that Tomlin's on the hot seat, but the national media will ramp that story up. And if that happens, teams will start to make some phone calls.